Hello and welcome to Bespoke Unit. My name is Paul Anthony.
I'm CP.
And in today's video, we're with Davidoff Cigars here in the Dominican Republic looking at how tobacco is cured and fermented. So Klaas, we've kind of moved away from the fields now and we're in the kind of second major stage of, taking the cigar to the next level. So what's actually happening in this building?
Well, at this point, the leaf is continuing their journey to hopefully make it into a Davidoff cigar, right?
Yeah.
It's already starting to change its colors inside this curing barn. But we're bringing in the leaf and we're gonna be basically sewing the leaf onto these bamboo sticks. And when we sew them, we're going to be grabbing these two leaves. You can see here, this leaf had a little insect, right? That was biting through inside. Let's flip it. We're gonna be sewing them right here in the center vein, into the center vein, the big vein, about 1 inch down.
And you're putting them spine to spine?
Yeah, back to back. The reason being is because when they're drying, they're gonna be drying and folding inward. So, or in this case, outward. If you put them front to front, they're gonna fold onto each other, and then basically they're not gonna have enough room to breathe. We want the leaves to have enough space and enough room to breathe because the leaf is about 85% water inside, and the other 15% is dry material. And if all this water is not being able to exit, then it can leave for the leaf to rot.
So, during that 45-day period, is there a kind of estimate of how much moisture content you want the leaf to lose as it's going from green to yellows into brown?
Well, the leaf, you'll start seeing that the edges will start changing to yellows first. It all is transitioning. At one moment you have all three beautiful colors. But when you start seeing the yellows, that part of the leaf at that moment has lost about 50% of the initial water that it had. And then when it's starting to turn into brown, now it's losing about another 25% of that moisture. You always want the leaf to be moist. You never want to dry it completely. If you dry a leaf at any moment, you're stopping the physical changes and the chemical changes on the leaf. So for example, Candela wrapper, right? Candela wrapper is green leaves of tobacco that have been dried green. What they do is they heat up the curing barn, and overnight they dry the leaf, and basically because it's 100% dry, or not 100% dry, but dry, it will forever be green. You have stopped all the chemical, the physical changes and the chemical changes of that leaf, and will forever be green and also taste different.
Sure. And as I look up here, we've already got a 25-foot ceiling, and just imagine there's 5 or 6 different racks. I mean, are you rotating those racks during the 45 days? And if so, why are you moving the leaves around?
The environment in here, we're trying to maintain it as stable as possible, but also the leaves need to be treated exactly the same or as evenly as possible. So it's kind of like a FIFO, like a first in, first out kind of deal, where when the leaves are being sewn onto these sticks, they first end up on the outside, and the next time they get moved up, they end up in the center. Then they get next time they get moved up, they get put in the outside. The top leaves are the older leaves. Heat rises, so if from the bottom it's nice and cooler, and the top is hotter.
Excuse me?
Yeah, some people. It's a working curing barn. So
we got some guys bringing in some fresh tobacco leaves out here. So, I suppose talking about from outside conditions, this is a barn sitting in the middle of a field in the middle of the Dominican Republic. So, how are outside conditions impacting what happens in here, and do you do anything to kind of stabilize the environment within here?
We want basically in temperature and also around humidity. You want about 85% humidity in here, 80, 85. You want temperature also between 80, 90 Fahrenheit.
Sure.
We gotta make sure that's
American and non-American audience. So.
And but basically, we have to control this humidity. If, for example, it's a very dry year like this one, what we have to do is we have to close the curing barn and make sure the humidity doesn't exit the curing barn. And what we can also do in case we need to add humidity is we can add water on the ground, and that will increase the humidity inside the curing barn. On a very wet year, we have to do exactly the opposite. We got to open up the doors to release humidity, and if need be, we can also put some charcoal, heat it up, on the floor, and that way increase humidity. This is a filler and binder farm, so that's the more traditional way. But in farms, for example, like in Yamasa, where it's a wrapper farm and we have to be a lot more delicate and much more equal and even, we even have invested into gas panels and a pipe system. Okay. So that way, evenly the whole curing barn is being moistened or dried at the same rate. So that way everything is controlled. What we have added also is we add a little layer of on the side of the panels where we can add water and we can evaporate the water and increase the humidity inside.
Oh, great.
So we've done a lot of investment in a wrapper farm.
So just like, myself or you will maintain a humidor at home, a different, humidity and temperature, could be seen as just a giant humidor. You're keeping it at obviously different temperature and humidity levels, but you're really trying to keep it stable during that 45-day period to evenly age the leaves as you need to.
Absolutely correct. This is our first giant humidor in the cigar process.
So Klaas, we've moved into a second curing barn here you have on the farm, and you can see this thing's pretty full up now. I mean, at what stage are we at? And you've brought some leaves down here to show us, and you kind of explain, what's happening.
Well, basically, the last curing barn was bringing in the leaves right after harvest. At this moment here, you're gonna find some second priming leaves. So this is all the way from the bottom, and those leaves behind me that are green, those leaves are third priming. So you can see that just a couple day difference of harvest. These are like 3 days later being harvested. These are still green. These have already started changing color dramatically. You also have to take into account that these leaves here are thinner, so they will dry out sooner than the ones that are higher up in the priming. The ones higher up in primings will last longer drying here inside the curing barn.
Are you still going to put these thinner leaves in here for 45 days along with the top ones? It doesn't matter what part of the plant it comes from.
As long as the humidity is inside the curing barn is stable and everything, they can stay here all they want. Okay. It is actually just logistically a lot easier to wait for all the leaves inside the curing barn to finish their process. And they will be maintained with the same humidity, the same process, and they will just be now just dry, but just waiting for their other counterparts just to finish their process. So it'll be fine. There's no need to worry there.
Okay, great.
But what's cool here is that you can see all the colors. This one's pretty much finished. Here you can see some greens. Now this is a beautiful one.
Wow, look at that.
So here you can see a lot of green here. You can start seeing the yellows coming in on the borders, right where the brown is. And then you can see all this brown down here. And then definitely you can start smelling the tobacco aroma.
It's definitely not as fresh. It's not that kind of fresh cut grass, kind of green smell you can get. That's tobacco.
It's intermingled here because you got both.
Yeah, you can still a little sweetness, but you can still...
Yeah, now you're actually starting to smell that normal tobacco smell that you're more accustomed to. Mm-hmm. Again, basically it's a 3-part process where you have the green, the yellow, and the brown. And if you were to dry the leaf when it's green, at that moment you're basically gonna be tasting like candela wrapper. It's gonna taste very green, very vegetable-like. If you are gonna be smoking a leaf that is very yellow, it would taste very sweet, very sugary, all the sucrose and fructose converting. And then when you actually dry it out to the brown stage, you're smoking that part, that's what you know as cigars, right? Of course, very raw, no fermentation, no aging still done on that leaf itself. What's interesting is that this smell that you're smelling, it's chemical thing happening here in the leaf. So you have in the cell the phenol and the phenol oxidaxa separated by a small cell membrane, and when the leaf is basically withering away and the cell wall disappears, those two come into contact. Because that cell membrane has disappeared, you got the oxidation of phenols, and that's when really the aromas start coming up, right? You see this all the time. Typical day example, right? You got an apple, apple falls from the tree. that side of the apple that hit the ground will have changed in color, will have changed in texture, smell, and taste. You know, that basically, that side matured quicker or matured by trauma, by impact.
Sure.
This is what's happening here, but in a very slow, controlled environment. If I were to take my fingers and press the leaf would turn color, and I would be forcibly putting the phenol and the phenolic oxide into contact. And that's not what we want.
Causing that trauma like the apple dropping.
Exactly. We don't want no traumas on the leaf. That's why you see here that the leaves, you have 2 on this side, back to back, 2 on this side, 2 on this side, and you can see that they all have a lot of room and a lot of space to breathe. That way they're releasing the humidity and the water at a nice, evenly pace, and that way is as even as possible for this 45-day period.
Sure. And once the leaf turns brown, I mean, if you were to, you know, not age this tobacco and ferment it, what would a kind of a typical flavor profile be? Would it be bitter, or like what's the...
So the last thing to dry on the leaf is the center vein.
Sure.
So that's the center vein is what contains the most water, so you have to wait for that to dry out.
Right, completely.
But at that moment, that tobacco is basically what you would similarly see in a cigar. The only problem, the only difference is that basically that tobacco has not gone through all the processes to be refined. So it hasn't gone to the fermentation that's gonna lower all the carbohydrates, all the nitric juice elements. It's gonna reduce the alkaloid nicotine. You know, it's gonna reduce all these harsh elements. It hasn't gone to the aging that makes the tobacco a lot more noble, a lot more even. And without all that, if you smoke it right off the curing barn, it's gonna taste what you know, but it's gonna be harsh, and it's going to kind of rip apart your throat, you know, especially if it's from the top of the plant. The bottom leaves of the plant, like this one, is just second priming. You might be able to smoke it, but it's still, you're gonna feel some harshness. You might feel some dirty aftertaste, and it won't be as pure. And we still need at least, to Davidoff standards, at least 5 more years before this makes it into a cigar.
It's much more refined. I think that's where we may be going next.
Yeah, we're going to fermentation next. Right now we are in fermentation warehouse for binder and wrapper. This is a warehouse that has many piles of tobacco, averaging about 4,000 pounds each one of these piles, some a little more.
Wow.
And basically you got wrapper, you got binder. This specific pile of tobacco that we are flipping right now is Yamasa binder.
So this is from the Dominican.
Yeah, this
from
is
your
Dominican wrapper, or Dominican binder. The wrapper is actually in another pile right now. We have 4,557 pounds between these two. And what they're doing is they're flipping this pile and remaking it over there.
farm. Okay.
So
How many times is that happening? How frequently?
in this specific case, we are already in the second fermentation. It's happened 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 times. We're flipping it and trying to make sure that the outside ends up being in the middle, that the bottom ends up on the top, and in 11 times, pretty much these leaves end up everywhere.
Sure.
But what ends up happening is that it takes about 4 people in about 4 hours to flip it.
Wow. That's actually a lot quicker than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
This is pretty intense.
Yeah, it's very labor intensive. And normally what happens is we're checking really at temperature. Fermentation is very easy. Fermentation, in my mind, is a very simple equation. It's volume or weight, right? Weight plus humidity equals heat. If you have volume or weight and no humidity, then nothing happens. Heat does not rise. If you have no volume, very little volume, you have a lot of humidity, the tobacco rots. Heat doesn't get created and tobacco rots. So you need a combination of both. What we do is that we have a thermometer that goes right in the middle of it, and basically we're looking at the temperature. So you can look at the second fermentation, right? Which is all binder. And we can look at the temperature in Fahrenheit rise. So the first time the pile was made, it was 89, 91, 70, 97, 99, 102, 106. The temperature was rising too much, and we decided to flip it.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, that way, what we do is we take a handle, right? just as an example, we take a handle and we do this, and we air it out, we lower the temperature. And then basically...
How heavy is it? That's probably about a pound, maybe a little less.
About?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about a pound. Normally, 2.5 pounds is about that much.
Okay.
Right?
The smell in here is amazing. That's one thing you want to comment on. It's so sweet, the aromas.
The smell here varies. You never know.
It smells
what's
good right now to me, anyway.
You never know what's gonna happen.
You get some funk coming out somewhere. So, and then does this represent like 1 year's crop? You won't mix years, or do you mix years? Like, how does that work?
This is lot 102. This is last year's crop.
Last year's crop.
Yeah. So this is crop 2017, 2018.
So this has already been flipped 10 times, and we're only 1 year into the process, and it could be here for 5 years, or does that 5-year aging, is it always in this room, or does it, once it hits a certain point, it ages somewhere else?
So tobacco from the bottom of the plant, meaning volado seco, needs less time. Tobacco from the top of the plant, like ligeros, need more time. These are tobaccos that have more nitrogenous elements in the leaf and have more elements to work with. So fermentation can last anywhere from a very sped up process of 6 months, up to 2 years.
Okay.
So we're a year in, and this is tobacco from the third group, meaning it is more or less a seco.
Okay.
Because in Yamasa we do 8 groups. Instead of dividing in 4, we divide in 8 because wrapper, we're a little bit more precise. But this is about a seco. The veins are not very pronounced. You can see it's stretchy and it's oily. So this is more or less from the bottom of the plant. This is a little lighter tone. These are watermarks. We don't have to worry about that. That is a mark. So again, this is all binder. So it doesn't matter because it's gonna be inside. It's already been classified. You could argue that you get one good side of wrapper here, and this probably is gonna be binder. So it gets classified as binder because one of the leaves is binder.
Sure.
But basically, this is from the bottom of the plant, and maybe a couple more flips, and they'll decide that it's ready.
Sure.
But how do you know when it's ready?
Yeah,
that's the question.
A big question. Yeah.
Well, you have to smoke it. You gotta try it. But one of the good ways to know is that you see here that you see the temperature is rising. 89, 91, 97, 99, 102, 106, and we flip it. The temperature was too high. So then we redo the pile again. You see 94, 108, 111, 114, 115, and then it starts to go down. 110, 110. What happened was that the humidity was missing. So
Sure.
humidity is missing, so temperature starts to go down. So we gotta flip it and add humidity again. Next time around, it's 90, 90, 90, 91, 92. It's very stable. It stays at 95. You're saying, hey, it's very stable. Let's flip it. Let's see if we can get some more heat into it. Let's add more humidity. Next time around, it ended lagging about 105. And look how long it lasted before we flipped it.
So it's getting more stable.
It's getting more stable. It's getting more stable.
Sure.
So this is an indication that soon this will be ready.
Okay.
Just by looking at the numbers, I know that there's maybe 1 or 2 more flips on this, and it's probably going to be ready. Of course, we gotta try it and see if it's going to be harsh or not.
Sure.
But basically,
So when you're trying it, what you do? You wrapping it around the pre-lit cigar and then smoking it. How do you?
You can do that.
Yeah.
You can wrap out, if it's like a wrapper or a binder, you can wrap it around, or you can make just a made-up cigar right there and then and smoke it.
Yeah.
100% pure of that type of tobacco.
Nice. And this is obviously from your Yamasa farm, but if, say, for instance, the cigars we were smoking earlier from Ecuador, will you bring the leaves in and ferment them here, or they'll be fermented in Ecuador? And then how does that process work when you're using tobacco that's not from, say, it's from Nicaragua, like Ecuador? Like, what happens there?
Well, Ecuador, the tobacco that we're buying from there, Connecticut seed, Ecuador. It's such a thin leaf. It comes already very well prepared. So it's a tobacco that we don't really have to work on in regards to fermentation and aging. It's pretty much comes ready. We just do some final sorting and some quality control here right before it gets added to a cigar. But basically anything else like habanos or any tobacco, including fillers or binders that we are acquiring from Nicaragua, Mexico, other countries, Even Ecuador, if it's an Habano type, those we finish it here. Like our 702, that's our hybrid grown in Ecuador, that we finish it here. And so we have to go through the whole fermentation process and then a little bit of storage time for aging before it gets added into cigar. But Ecuador seed is already a very thin leaf. There's not a lot to work with. You might even ruin or break the leaf. It's a very expensive leaf and you don't want to really play around a lot with that one.
Too much of it, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
No, and basically what you're going to be seeing here is a lot of temperature. So this is a pile that's being flipped. And you can stick your hand in here.
Oh wow, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's nice and warm.
Yeah, moist as well. You can feel
Yep, you can feel the humidity.
Yeah.
So this is a tobacco that's from the bottom of the plant. So there's not a lot of strong aromas here. But when you have a tobacco from the top of the plant or a very strong seed, this room is filled with very strong smell. And you can tell that the tobacco that's being flipped is a very strong one. Because what's happening in fermentation is not just heat, but in essence, the tobacco is sweating out all the bad stuff. So we're talking about is sweating out the carbohydrates, the acidity, the proteins, the alkaloid, nicotine, you know. So we're basically reducing all these harsh elements so that when you smoke it, it doesn't leave a harsh aftertaste. And it's pleasant, and it's only about aroma and taste.
Sure. And I see here that you're, you know, introducing some more moisture to the atmosphere. It's obviously to try and stabilize the humidity in here. So what humidity are you trying to keep this room at, typically?
Normally a little bit higher than normal tropical, but I mean, we're keeping it more or less same humidity as environment as like in a curing barn. But basically what's going to be really interesting for you is when I show you our Davidoff sauna.
How long are we gonna, well, how long are you guys gonna keep the tobacco in here for?
So basically, according to fermentation, right? So when you see the fermentation temperature drop, you notice that it's missing humidity. We gotta open up all the tobacco again. It's missing humidity, so we put it in here, and that way the tobacco gets humidity all by air, no direct contact. It's all in the atmosphere, as you can obviously see in our beautiful sauna. It's basically adding humidity indirectly, you know? And that way these tobacco leaves do not get stained. And all these veins. We will basically leave it here overnight. At the end of the day, we just turn it off and it just stays in there. And in the morning, it's nice. There's no excess humidity and it's nice and humid to remake the pile the next day.
Sure.
Already.
And then you're getting back in that cycle to become stabilized again.
Yeah, you go back into the cycle, you see the temperature rise, it goes back down, and it's sometimes up to a 2-year process.
Oh, wow.
Just of this. That's really where we moisten up the tobacco for this process. This is just to maintain the humidity so it doesn't dry out the environment. And you can see that we also put all these tarps over it. That way, no drop or no water is coming into direct contact into this precious tobacco, because now we're talking about binders and wrappers that are much more expensive. And especially when wrapper, you can't get stains. No. So we have to be very, very careful with these tobaccos.
Well, Charles, Philippe and I really hope you enjoyed that video. Please also check out the full-length documentary of how Davidoff makes cigars.
And down here, there's a full playlist of our whole Dominican experience.